Alrighty, I think I'm live. I'm getting the hang of this thing, give me a month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and I start to get the hang of things. Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is when you're watching this. Thanks for being here. As always, I am Alison, Ellis of realflowerbusiness.com, and today we're gonna do another Q&A Tuesday. This is truly time to just answer questions that I have received during the week that feel like they are worthy of more than just a really quick little response to an individual because they might be a bigger topic to talk about. So last week, if you happened to tune in last week, I answered a question about how to invoice your customer for labor, for your delivery and setup, removal, all that kind of stuff. So if you didn't see that one, I want to encourage you to watch last week's live chat. It'll be the video right before this one, because I want to expand on that based on a question that came into my Facebook group yesterday. And the question was basically, help, how do I explain labor to my customer? And we had a couple of questions going back and forth that helped to sort of solidify a question that I had back, which is, what are we talking about here for labor? So, labor. I could genuinely talk about this for a week. We have to be specific in how we understand and how we speak about labor. Your design fee is part of your labor. And then you have labor for your delivery, your setup, your breakdown. That's a whole different type of labor, all right? Sometimes people just say labor, and then we just jump to our own definition of what we call labor. But in this question, this floral designer is asking, help, how do I explain labor to my customer? Because it's a line item, and it's $2,000 on this invoice. And the customer happens to be $2,000 over her budget. And so she suggested to the florist, if you just take off that labor, we good. You just take off that labor and we're at the right budget. So the question is, how do I explain it? And this is where the question is, what is included in that labor? So for this particular floral designer, that's all the labor. That's their design time, their setup, their delivery, and all of that. So again, the reason why I started this by saying maybe go back and watch last week's live stream is because I really touched on a lot of these little nuances of what you might consider when you are invoicing a client for labor. So, I know many, many years ago, there was a florist in my area who invoiced their design fee, their labor, and it was something like 30%. People talked about it all the time. Do you know so-and-so charges 30% labor? Yeah, guess what? I charge more than that, but I don't line item it, okay? So that's what I wanted to just sort of touch on briefly today. I did a long thing about this, half hour about it last week. So I don't want to rehash everything I already talked about, but to expand from last week, this is a really great example of why you need to, first of all, reevaluate our systems from time to time. This customer is identifying this line item as something she can do without. She's incorrect about that, okay? We don't need to get all hyped up and crazed about it. She's just incorrect. You don't get to take the labor off. But this is where I want to really suggest, as a floral designer, to take a look at why you're presenting it that way. Is there a reason why your customer needs to know how much total is going to labor versus your flower markup? And maybe this is just your first, if this is the first time having pushback like this is just like a first toe in the water of, hey, maybe I should change the way that I present these fees. Maybe it doesn't need to be broken down as a line item. In fact, it should be built into each item. So one of my friends, Blair, shout out, Blair was one of my friends who came to help at my workshop this year too. So she and I think a lot of we talk about a lot of stuff behind the scenes. She had a great answer to this person, which is, hey, if this is, the labor that's going into your making the product, it's just like when you order food. They don't take out the labor that they charge for the time for the cooks to prepare food. They don't line item that. Like, here's what your dish cost, here's what you paid the chef, right? Same thing for us. That's built into our final product. So if someone walks into your flower shop and buys an arrangement, you don't then say, oh yeah, that's the price of the arrangement and here's what it cost me to make it, which is an additional fee, right? So this is why I am speaking with certainty and not just suggesting, hey, maybe. With certainty, we want to build that design fee into each arrangement because we think like a flower shop. Again, I have a course called Flower Math that teaches florists how to price for profit, all right? And the way we want to think is like a flower shop. You wouldn't walk into a flower shop and there's a price for an arrangement in the cooler, but then when I get to the counter with that arrangement, they also add on a design fee. They build it in to the retail price. And that's what we want to do. Even if you only do events, it doesn't matter if you don't have a retail flower shop. We want to think like a retail florist when we are selling our flowers. So my suggestion to this particular person on this particular question, again, the question isn't, how should I charge for labor? The question is, how should I explain to my customer that I can't take this $2,000 off? And so to answer that question, you're in a little bit of a pickle because if they're truly $2,000 over budget and they got to cut it, you might have to just suggest how they take $2,000 off their order. That's a lot of money. I don't know how big the order is overall, but if that is where you're at, if that's where the customer's at, we're at this price, I need it down, then they have to give some things up. That's just how it goes. They don't get to just take off the labor. But we can't just say to them, oh, there's no wiggle room. Because at some point along the line, you lost the meeting of the minds. At some point along the lines, they added something, you added to their budget, but they did not fully agree to this, at least in their own mind. Okay? I'm not accusing you of wrongdoing. I'm just saying at this point they're saying, hey, this is not something I'm willing to spend. So those are really where you're stuck at this point is, do they really not have the $2,000 or are they just trying to negotiate last minute? I'm assuming this is kind of last minute. And if they're not able to afford what they want, then it might be time to walk away. But I don't know how far into the process you are. For some reason, my interpretation of the question is like, this is a booked wedding that's coming up. We're finalizing details. And she's like, hey, just take that labor off. Now, I could be wrong about that. Maybe this is just a quote that went out. If it's just a quote that went out, there's just not a meeting of the minds on budget. And maybe there's a way to meet somewhere in the middle, but maybe not. But if this is a booked client and we're down the pike and we're trying to make this thing happen, no, you cannot take off $2,000 worth of labor in order for them to meet their budget. But what can you do? That is part of our job, is to help maximize their budget. It's not our job to give them $2,000 worth of time and talent for free. That's not the job. But it could be, oh, well, then we remove your ceiling installation. Or, well, then we have to scale back the centerpieces or remove whatever it is for the ceremony. Have a realistic suggestion for them. We can't just say, nope, can't do it, and then not have another answer for them. So use this as every year is a learning year in business. This is my 25th year in business. I am doing and trying new things still. It is just part of how we stay relevant. So if you have gotten, like I said, a little toe in the water of, whoa, labor pushback, consider changing how you do it moving forward, where you're building it into everything you're doing. You might still itemize your delivery and all that. Again, watch last week's video if you want a more thorough breakdown on really my thought process behind the why and how of presenting pricing in an invoice. There is not one right way to do it. But at this point, if you have a customer who's looking to take $2,000 off, it doesn't come out of your pocket. It comes out of the list of items on their wish list. All right. So I wish this floral designer very good luck, because it's tricky and it's hard when you're, especially if you are down the pike, right? We're booked, we have a contract, we're a few weeks or a month away. It's hard for you to then just say, nope, here's how it is, because you can't right? We can't force them to pay us more money than they have, or more money than they're willing. And I was going to say unrelated, but it's not unrelated, fully related, okay? But not necessarily just on labor, on the overall purchase price. I don't want to be the stretch. I'm going to say that again. I don't want to be the thing in their budget that was like too expensive for them, because this leads to regret, buyer's remorse, and chargebacks on the credit card. I have never had this happen personally, but this is something that happens after the wedding. Someone will dispute a charge on their credit card, not necessarily because you did anything wrong, but because they didn't like how much they paid. This is a true fact, and frankly happens way more with super high budgets than with lower budgets. Believe it, okay? And I'm talking high budgets. Somebody will charge back $10,000 to a floral designer. Nope, sorry, refusing this charge. This is why, one, we don't take credit cards for final payment, but also, this is why we don't want to be the stretch. We want to be somebody they're so comfortable with the budget. Yep, this works for me. Yep, I'm agreeing to this. We don't want them to have buyer's remorse, okay? So it's not a good customer, whether it's a $1,000 client or a $10,000 client. If that money is too much for them to be spending, it is not a good fit, and they will not be a good customer for you, okay? Keep that in mind. All right, I got a couple of other really, really good questions that were in my group, and I'm gonna just rattle through a few of them right now. Okay, one, this is just personal interest for me, not gonna lie. Cake flowers, oh my goodness. We could go down a rabbit hole on this. So a question was asked in my group about cake flowers, and there were quite a lot of them on this cake, and some of them, most of them, are considered toxic. Okay, so we're talking about delphinium, which I think a lot of us know is one of those like pretty poisons, right? They're pretty, but they're toxic. Ranunculus was on the cake, which somebody else pointed out is also toxic. I'm curious, what's not toxic is where my standpoint is, because where were the flowers grown? What were they treated with? Even if it's a rose that's supposed to be safe on your cake, is it? So anyway, this conversation started about the delphinium. We'll just pick on the delphinium because it's easy. So it's toxic. It's toxic. We can't put toxic things on cakes. So I just want to say I have mixed feelings about this. I want to be just so honest. Because I have for over 24 years now been putting flowers on cakes. No one has ever eaten the flowers that I'm aware of. No one has ever been poisoned, for sure. So, you know, part of the conversation is like, well, how much do you need to eat to be poisoned? Okay. And I want to just sort of put on the brakes there and just say, again, things change in the world, things change in our industry. And I think we are just at a point right now, my floralpreneur friends, where people identify that delphinium is poisonous, so you can't put it on a cake. Because now people are thinking that it's poisonous, and so you can't put it on the cake. So no matter what you think or what I might think about nobody's going to eat it, or they would have to eat so many flowers for them to actually get sick, if people are going to be, I'm going to put it this way, if people are going to be judging it as being wrong, then we need to get on board and understand that that's going to be happening. I'm going to use this as an example from way back when I first started doing flowers over 30 years ago. And what I was taught is, you know, sometimes you have like a sunflower, you know, and it's kind of like leaning forward, and it will start to look dead just because it's leaning forward. But if we turn it up towards the sun, right? If we turn it up, now it looks fresh again. And it just makes that small little turn makes all the difference. The reality is it's the same sunflower. It's no more alive or dead. It's just about the way we're positioning it. And I think it's the same sort of thing with these cake flours being toxic or not toxic. How much do you have to eat to make it toxic? Okay. I personally feel that people are not eating cake flours. I personally feel this is not an actual problem that we need to address. Like, if one more person gets poisoned, I haven't heard anything about this happening in real life. So there's that, right? Just, we could put that aside. That's just a fact. But we are now at a point where, when I did my workshop in April here in Vermont, I had a lovely local baker come in. And while we were talking about the flours and, what do we want to put on the cake, the baker said, oh, well, you can't use delphinium, obviously, because those are poisonous, right? Interesting. I mean, it caught my ear, and again, not incorrect, but it was like, oh, like now this is, matriculating out into the general population, the bakers, who else knows this now, that this is poisonous, and so we can't put it on the cake. Even though nobody's going to eat it, even though placing it on the cake isn't poisoning the cake, right? Because I want to be, again, really real about this. I am not somebody who's like hair on fire, let's panic. I think I would be more concerned about what's on the stems of those spray roses that you're sticking in the cake than the little bits of delphinium that might be placed around it or in little accent pieces. All right, so again, here for the honesty and the realness of, I have never had a problem with cake flours in all of these years. And that said, for a really long time now, like probably 10 years at least, whenever I talk to my customers about a cake, I will often suggest that they have the baker make sugar flowers or do the decor as opposed to flowers. So I don't push cake flowers as a thing, like you need to have flowers on the cake. I inquire about it. I encourage them to choose something that's fully edible, and that's totally how I word it. I'm like, I personally think it's best if everything is edible on the cake. Again, that said, just the other week, the baker asked for some flowers last minute. I put some together. I gave them a little array, and they used what they wanted to. And yeah, there were like some big roses and some scabiosa and little things on the cake. All right. So we just need to be true. And I guess what I mean by that is, if we're thinking we are holier and higher than others by not using delphinium on a cake, but we're putting all kinds of other non-thinking about it stuff on there, let's just even that playing field a little bit. And maybe the answer is like, all of the flowers are not exactly food safe, and all of the flowers should not be eaten, right? I don't know if that's an answer to anything so much as just a self-indulgent need to talk a little bit about that, because it's come up recently, like the last 2 years, way more than I have ever heard this conversation in the, many, many decades now at this point. I've been a florist for over 32 years, doing weddings for over 25 years. And I've never ever heard that conversation as much as I have recently. Okay. That's it on my cake flowers. All right. 2 more really quick things. One, these are 2 PETA questions, pain in the you-know-what. So somebody asked about their customer after the wedding would like to donate the flowers. Awesome. And they would like a receipt. Ooh, let's get into this. This is super short and easy. So if you have a customer who would like to donate their flowers, it's generous and wonderful for them to do that. There's some coordination involved in it. Like, are you bringing the flowers? Are they bringing the flowers? But these are used flowers, right? It's basically like saying, hey, I'm having catering for my event and I want to give away the leftovers and I want a receipt for that. The caterer is not going to give that receipt, just like you're not going to give the receipt. You're not accepting a donation. You're not vouching for the value of this. They have an invoice from you. They can take this to their accountant. So I'll make this really short and sweet for you. I'm not an accountant. I don't know how any of that works, but that's between you and your accountant. Okay? You go to your accountant and tell them, hey, I want to try to write off my kids' wedding flowers. You go and do that, okay? And maybe they will help you with that. But I am not in cahoots on that, all right? It's just not your place. You're not receiving the donation, so you're not giving a donation receipt. And there's no reason for you to vouch for the value of these flowers because just like anything you're giving to Goodwill, right? That shirt is not worth the $50 you paid for it. It's a $3 value according to that tax chart, okay? So whether they paid $150 for the centerpieces or not doesn't mean that they have donated $150 per centerpiece to whatever charity they're bringing it to, okay? So just please, bless your heart for the questions here, but like, good golly, Miss Molly, no, we do not offer donation receipts. And then finally, this one's a great one too. Mary, I think this came from Mary. Repurposing the centerpieces. How do you quickly kind of like wrap them for guests to take? I really like this question because I think there's a really simple answer, which is there is no way to quickly do any of this, okay? This is a full-on additional service that you are offering. Talk about labor, okay? That's labor. So this requires you going back at the end of the night, gathering up the flowers, wrapping them or putting them in something, and then handing them to people who have been drinking for many hours. I just want to throw that just to set the scene, okay? So if you've been at a wedding at the end of the night, you know, right? Especially if you haven't been there all night. It's like you're walking into like, wow, what went on here, right? So great answers were given in my group, by the way. Best answer that I saw was make it like a little hand tied and have it wrapped already so that when they pull it out, there's just flowers ready to go. That is the best answer, okay? Because there's no quick way to do any of this. So if you're going to be doing this at all, even if it's already pre-wrapped, there is time, there is interaction going on, right? There is all kinds of energy that you're expelling to make this happen. So just make sure that you're being compensated for that. And I love the idea of the flowers going home, which is why I usually like to deliver in containers that guests can take. But if you want to get those containers back, if it's easy for them to just lift the flowers out like a little bouquet and walk out, that's what I would do. I would not bother with a water source. I wouldn't bother with any of that stuff. They can figure that out when they get back to wherever they're going. If you do want to do a water source, maybe it's a little mason jar. I don't know how you are transporting glass, right? Like it's a really tricky thing. What you can do, one of my favorite products, actually, I don't plug a lot of products. You've probably noticed that about me if you've been following me a long time. But Flower Box. I love Flower Box. It is recyclable. If you've followed me for any amount of time, you've seen like I put my bouquets in them pretty often. So it is, you can just go to flowerbox.com and you can order boxes that you can just sort of like, they come shipped flat. You just bump them into shape. There's a plastic liner in them, and then you can fill them with water and let people go out with them. So there's no glass. It's a recyclable product, so it's kind of feels a little more eco-friendly going out the door. But again, they cost money. So it's not free to give them a flower box. This is where we need to consider the labor that goes into it. If they're also getting these little flower boxes to go in, every piece of it needs to be accounted for. And I love, and I really do want to encourage, taking the flowers home. donating them to a nursing home or whatever charity you want to donate to in your area. Wonderful. But even that stuff, it just doesn't come free, right? Somebody's got to do the work. So just keep all that in mind when you are pricing, when you are offering services, when you are having conversations, because sometimes if something feels like it's a tricky conversation, how am I going to tell them this? And it's really not that tricky if you're just being super honest and anchored in your own self-knowing of like why this fee is what it is, why this takes so much time, why it doesn't actually save you money for me to come back and distribute these flowers, because it's like takes time, energy, people, all the stuff. Okay, so keep doing beautiful work in your business. If you would like to come closer into my community, join me over on Patreon. I will be live next Tuesday here for free Q&A, but then we have our monthly Q&A call for my Patreon members for the Flourishing Floralpreneur tier. It's a small group, and we talk about your specific things going on in your business. Little coaching session, little therapy session. It's really a wonderful little small group I have over there. So you're welcome to join us if you want some more insight on a more personal level. All right. You keep doing beautiful work. Have a great day. I've got a wedding this week I cannot wait to get started on. I've got some stuff going in my studio already, so I'm going to head out there. I'm going to wash some buckets and do all the things. So I will see you next time. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you